Well, it is good to be back with you again for another day of Bible study. My name is Kevin Young, and I have the privilege of being lead clergy here at Christ Table, and I'm glad that you are along with us for this journey. If you'd like to be a part of this Bible study called The Book, you can download all of the resources at the URL right there on the screen, go.christstable.today/the book. There you'll find a PDF that will help you follow along on all 24 days over 7 weeks of this study. You'll find the entire schedule there. Also, some other resources if you would like to get the printed copy of this for you to journal along with us, as well as a book and other resources that come along with this. Then you can take care of all of that right there at that URL. They all come together in this box, and all you need to do at that URL, if you go to go.christstable.today/the book, is just click on the button there that says get the box, and then you'll have information there on all of that. We're spending these next few weeks looking into the book, which is the Bible, to see the different genres and types of literature and writings that are in there. It's not all the same. Some of it's wisdom literature, some of it is allegory, some of it is factual, literal, gospel truth. Some of it is prophecy. And so we're kind of taking these weeks to kind of look into these different types of things and what we can learn in there. And this week we're looking at the historical Jesus. So we're kind of starting in the middle and starting with Jesus, which is probably not a terrible place to start. And today we come to a passage, John chapter 4, verses 7 through 14. And this is a smaller section of a larger story. Now, you may recognize the story, and if you do extra credit and continue to read in today's passage past verse 14, which may be a great thing to do if you're not terribly familiar with the story, we tend to take a look at this passage and see it through the lens of the woman who is in this passage, and that's a very good thing to do. But what we're trying to do here a little bit more is focus on Jesus specifically. And so we're going to kind of pause midway through this text and just take a smaller portion, because we usually focus on the rest of the passage rather than this beginning part. And so John chapter 7, John chapter 4. I take the slide down and then I forget where I am. John chapter 4, verses 7 through 14. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." And he was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. Now, there are several kind of red flags in this passage just here in these first beginning verses. And if you continue reading the entirety of this passage, the entire story, there are red flags all throughout this. This is just kind of a red flag story. And John has a tendency to kind of do those things in order to help teach us. So what are some of the red flags here? Well, first of all, we see a Samaritan woman, and Jesus, being a Jew from Judea, from Israel, here in this proximity of a Samaritan woman, there are a couple of things that are wrong with this scenario during this day and age. First of all, a man and a woman, they're together, kind of alone, not a very good thing, especially at a well, which was a traditional gathering place for women only. For a man to be there along with a woman, it just didn't look good. And beyond that, the fact that he is Jewish, that she is Samaritan, it's like oil and water, is friction. And he is now asking her to do something for him, which was kind of another breach of custom and protocol. He's alone, the text points out, because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. And so the text is actually cluing us in that this is awkward, and we should be seeing it kind of as awkward. The woman was surprised, though, because Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. So she said to Jesus, "You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And so our inclinations were correct here, that this is a situation that is, to use a word, it is taboo. It is a taboo situation. So the woman is kind of surprised that Jesus is having anything to do with her. And I want to hit pause here for just a moment, because they're in proximity to this airing live. If you're watching this by delay or watching this sometime well after the fact, this is very timely in that when we are doing this morning live, there is a conflict that likely seems to be a war that is going on between Israel and between Palestine. And it is not something that I am educated or capable enough to go into all of the nuances of Middle Eastern foreign policy and relationships between Middle Eastern countries and people groups, especially this one. This one runs deep. It runs way back, and from what I can see, there's ownership of problems that are on kind of both sides of this. And I don't want to both sides this conversation. I don't necessarily think that that's fair, but the point here being that there is a lot of hatred and animosity in both directions in this, it seems, and it may well be deserved, as oftentimes happens during conflicts. Both sides do things that perhaps are less than Christ-like, less than peaceful, less than positive, less than healing. We're human. We operate oftentimes out of our pain and out of retribution and retaliation rather than redemption. I don't know what the best move is here, but one of the things that I want to point to is the fact that this is something of the relationship between Jews and the Samaritans during this time period. It was a very complex relationship where between some people there was anger and hatred and frustration, and rather than lay blame, it may be good for us to just step back and say, what have we in our journey struggled to show redemption or kindness, because instead we showed hatred or anger toward individuals? And this is actually, I don't normally do this, but we'll do this today. This is the first question out of today's Bible study for reflection. And I think that it's a good one. Sometimes, though, whenever we pose questions like this, and I think that this is a great question because there may be specific people groups or groups of people that we do have anger or hatred or animosity towards. And I think that if we say, no, we don't, we may not be being honest with ourselves, because I guess probably we all do, because we're human. So sometimes it may be better, and I'm going to drop that S off of there to say, not necessarily when you reflect upon this, if it's difficult for you to say that you struggle with anger or hatred towards individuals, maybe it's easier to boil it down to a person or an individual. Because in that moment, it takes out some of those things that we kind of resist thinking about ourselves, that we have bigotry in our hearts, that we have hatred for ethnic groups in our hearts, that we don't see people who are different in their socioeconomic class or in their political parties for us as being something that we hate or get angry about. But sometimes it may well be that the individual focusing on that allows us to see ourselves through a new lens. So an individual. And this is what I love about the story here in John chapter 7 with Jesus, is that we're not receiving a theological dissertation on relationships between people groups such as the Jewish people in this time and the Samaritan people of this time. We're receiving an educational dissertation on how we interact with individuals who we might dislike, disdain, or try to otherwise avoid. And Jesus tends to not do that. He shows us a better way, right? So he's here with this Samaritan individual, and she's feeling like this should not be taking place, and Jesus is breaking some of these boundaries. And, sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket, she says. Now, I clearly have made a mistake here, and this is what happens with live. We put up sometimes the wrong slide. So let's pull up this slide here. Nope, that's it. Okay. So why don't I just do this? Let's go and let me just read it here out of the book, and then we'll catch back up to that slide. For you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink? And Jesus replies here to her. He says, if you only knew the gift that God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me and I would give you living water. And so Jesus changes the conversation here from a literal conversation about water to a metaphorical conversation about water, saying, you're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan woman, why are you giving me why are you asking me for a drink? And Jesus is like, oh, maybe there's something more important here that I can offer you than you can offer me, and that is living water. She doesn't understand what he's saying here, and I don't think any of us would, right? But sir, you don't have a rope or you don't have a bucket, she says, and this well here is very deep. Where would you get this water, this living water from? And besides, do you think that you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed? And Jesus replied, anyone who drinks this water that you have, this water that is in this well, will soon become thirsty again. But those who drink the water that I will give will never be thirsty again. And it becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. And this is a theme throughout John, this idea of eternal life and Jesus giving it and trying to help people see that other things in the world that do give life, water gives life, it sustains. But what Jesus gives sustains longer. It gives more life. John 10:35, a little bit later here in this text of John, he says that it is life abundant, life that is overflowing, life that is more than can be contained by any bucket, be it a well bucket or be it a human bucket, this life. So Jesus has taken this opportunity to help teach her something, teach us something about him and about God. But in order to see that, we have to use a different lens, right? Because in this moment, the lens that she is using is a lens that sees water for water, that sees the literal for the literal, that isn't able to yet see that what he is speaking of and talking about is something that is different, something that is beyond. Jesus has a tendency to do this, especially in John. And so she has the need to change her lens in order to see differently. Sometimes we become so committed to the way that we see the world, to the lenses that we use on the world, that we are unable to see. Sometimes they'll say, the forest for the trees, but you're unable to see the truth, or you're unable to see the reality because you are blinded by how narrow your lens is. Sometimes to truly see reality, you have to look beyond what you can see. You have to broaden your lens or pick up a different lens. Whenever we come back to this conversation or this thought about conflict, hate, anger, hostility, bad blood, it can be difficult to see the real picture or the big picture if we are committed to the lens through which we are seeing it and trying to force everybody else in the world to see through our lens. It may well be that the best thing that we can do to truly see is to not ask others to see it our way through our lens, but to pick up somebody else's lens and see it their way. This is what Jesus is offering here to her, and I think it may well be what he's offering to us as well. The opportunity to see differently, not by forcing Jesus and the rest of the world to see through our lens of this water and this bucket and this well, but for us to step back, lay down our lens, and pick up Jesus's lens or pick up a different lens and maybe see what we're unable to see now